Recording in progress.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the March 26th Catholic Regional District Board meeting. I want to acknowledge that we're having the meeting on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin people. And we have an agenda in front of us, but I understand there's been some changes. Corporate Officer?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Item 10.2 has had a correction to add the correct wording is under that one now, with regards to sub-regional recreation. We have an addition from Director Fall, which we should place under 12.6. That's following the hospital board meeting yesterday, and it's consider putting amount in grant and aid. As such, we provided an updated financial plan bylaw, just in case that's considered. A printed copy is record. In addition, I suggest at the planning committee yesterday, there's been some changes. So item 15.1 should be removed and it will be presented at the April 8th meeting. And Director Gisborne has provided a notice of motion that should be considered under section 15 as well, with regards to expressing interest to City Council to communicate on sub-regional recreation.
Okay, so we've lost the existing 15.1, but we've added. Yeah, okay.
I will move that agenda.
Okay, move the agenda as presented, seconded by Southcott. Thank you. All in favor? None opposed. Adoption of the minutes of March 11th. Any errors or omissions? And we get a mover. Ball and McCormick. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carried. No delegations, no unfinished business. We have 2 items of correspondence. If anybody has any motions to be made or issues with those items, please speak up. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the chair's report. So there are a few more items. I'll try to get through them quickly. At the end of last month, I attended an online session regarding the Legislative Reform Initiative to modernize the Local Government Act, otherwise known as the LGA, called Reforming the Local Government, a Roadmap. It was put on by the AVICC. Featured Don Lidstone as a speaker. He's always an entertaining and engaging individual. His dry humor, it was really fun to watch, and he had a lot of interesting information that he passed on. And his survey followed the webinar as well. So they're gathering information from all sorts of elected officials and local governments around the area. Well, I guess regional districts. March 5th, Four Ties Hospice Society. I met with representatives there, along with Directors Gisborne and Southcott and Councillor Dowd, discussing potential locations for the Hospice Society facility that they are attempting to build in the area and what next steps they might take to make this project come to fruition. On March 5th, I met with the VIU Steering Committee. There were representatives from the school, the Tla'amin First Nation, other interested parties in the area regarding primarily future planning for what kind of curriculum they will have at the school in order to prepare students for future, what needs they're going to be in the upcoming economy. It's always a good one. And so we reviewed the draft report, and the final draft will be available sometime in the next few months. March 7th, I attended Islands Coast Economic Trust. Slightly shorter than our typical meetings, but it included a lot of information. Presentations regarding conversations with the First Nations regarding the future of the trust, how changes can be made to it to more put it in alignment with the needs and desires of the First Nations. There's another session about engaging the government, or with the government, I guess. And then third, regarding ICT's business plan for the coming year. After that, we approved financially supporting 2 Indigenous-led economic development projects. So that's always a fun way to end those meetings because you're giving away money to good programs. March 10th, library trustees, fairly typical, other than discussions regarding the cost of remediation of the facility after the recent flood. I'd say recent because there's been 2 or 3 now, so hopefully these things stop happening. And hopefully the issue that caused the problem will be sorted out. Otherwise, we may have another one in the future. Nobody wants that. March 12th to the 14th, the LGLA. I attended that in Richmond. Some really good sessions, especially one regarding how to get noticed by provincial government representatives, especially ministers. So I took a lot of notes and I'll be reviewing them, especially when we get closer to the UBCM and see if we can utilize some of these hints. Because there was actually ministers sitting on the panel, or former ministers, saying, hey, this is how you get noticed. And they even smaller communities engage lobbyists at some point. I didn't realize that kind of stuff happened at our level, but
maybe you
people are
should.
doing it. What's that?
Maybe you should. Yeah.
Well, we should look into all options, but, and 17th to the 8th and 18th, we had our service review meetings. I felt they went quite well. Hopefully we made some progress towards an acceptable conclusion. And many of the people in this room were at those sessions, so I'm not going to expand that. We can like. And then last night we had a reception with the First Nation Tla'amin Executive Council. Unfortunately, due to some of the illness that's going around in the community, not everybody from the Executive Council was able to attend, but I still think it was a successful, just a getting to know you kind of thing with the newly elected. Well, I say newly elected, it's about 5 or 6 months now, but the new members of the council that we hadn't had a chance to meet. So I thought it was a good experience. And I am done, so I'll go over to Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. So let me see. Okay, on the 6th of March, I saw the virtual reality film Zeta, which was also featured during the Cathet International Film Festival. I don't know if any of you saw it or if you've seen a virtual reality film. And this was shown at the Texada Museum, by the way, on the 6th of March. It is amazing. The film is in the goggles that you wear, and it is above you, below you. You swivel your chair and the view changes as you move your chair. It is absolutely stunning. And so it was called Texada, and it was kind of about the geological creation of the island, and its transition and kind of land use today. So it was really amazing film. I highly recommend it. So that was on the 6th. On the 7th, I participated in the homelessness count on Texada. On the 13th was the homelessness task force, and we're looking at action items, which we're now prioritizing, and that should be pretty much done the next meeting. So on the 17th, participated in the 2 service reviews, the regional recreation representing the board, and then social planning. And on the 19th, had the pleasure to go to a Texada Garden Club presentation by Sarah Bacon. If any of you have ever seen her, she is the most entertaining. She was talking about pruning, but let me tell you, it was a drama. It was a one-woman show that you could take on stage. She was absolutely mesmerizing as a speaker, and the Texada Garden folks are very grateful to her for coming to that. So on the 24th, I went to the board meeting of what was formerly known as Tourism Powell River. Their new name, which has been approved by the province, is Cathet Tourism. They wanted to keep tourism first, but it's now a provincial requirement that whenever you're an agency and you represent a geographic area, which is in the name, the geographic area name must go. So they are now Cathet Tourism, formerly known as Tourism Powell River, and they're now working on getting all their signs and all that stuff, sorted out. So that is a work in progress, but it was certainly a change. It's been in the works for a long time. On the 25th, with all of the rest of you, I attended the gathering, together with Tla'amin Nation, and it was great. Too bad sickness, prevented everyone from being there on their side, but it was really interesting, the conversations that resulted. This morning, I attended the annual general meeting of the Texada Heritage Commission, and a couple things to report. They are going to put in a movie theater into their museum, and we'll have 2 of the film Texada, the virtual reality, which is contained in, like I said, the headset that you wear. And we'll also be showing just all the old film footage of the old Sandcastle parade days from, you know, whenever. And there's a lot of film footage out there. It's kind of putting it together. So that's sort of their next project. And the other thing they're interested in, and passed a motion asking me to look into what it takes to designate heritage sites in the regional district. I don't believe we actually have any. So I'll be knocking on staff's door asking questions. And finally, I'll get to the pièce resistance coming up, and this is not yet, but at the end of April, and it's on April the 26th to celebrate Earth Day. It is an art show that I've agreed to participate in. The theme is sustainability and creativity. It's all kind of recycled, and I work with Beach Class, so it's really appropriate. So please keep that on your to-do list. The Renew Art Fair, April the 26th at the Cathette Art Center, 10 to 4. Thank you, Jim. That's my pitch and my report.
Well, you went and answered the question I had about the virtual reality film, if it was going to be available at the museum. Obviously, it is. That's great. It gives me another excuse to go back there. I really get a kick out of the museum over there.
It's also starting today at the Art Center Library for a week. So if you happen to be in town and can't get to Texada, or you want to see it more than once, it's opening today at the Art Center.
Okay, great news. Great for Southcott.
Written down. Yeah. Listen, look at us all going here.
Come back to it. Okay, all right.
So I'm gonna save everybody repetition on a number of events that have already been noted. The LGLA event with Lidstone. I had a meeting in the middle of it, but I have yet to review the document and do the questionnaire. But it was an excellent presentation. Enjoyed it very much. Fort Tides Hospice meeting you mentioned, Chair. The one addition I have is a conference that Director Isaacson and I and Councillor Doat attended in Vancouver called High Ground. It is sponsored by an organization now called the Center for Civic Governance, which used to be called the Columbia Institute. I'll just mention that the main focus was, in my perception and experience of it anyway, was very much around engaging and constructively engaging with an increasingly questioning, involved public, highly pertinent to my own personal experience. And I'll do that basically in a nutshell for me, keeping to the high ground, putting forward narrative that is an alternative, and an alternative hopefully to a wide enough audience that provides answers, possibility, hope, all of the alternatives to the worry, fear, apprehension, and general feeling that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, basically. That seems to be pretty prevalent these days. So it was hugely worthwhile, and really an experience with kindred people there who really want to see government continue to work and good governance in our experience, which I think is what we all crave as well. So that was a worthwhile trip. The service reviews and the social with the folks from the nation yesterday that was just wonderful to just hobnob for a while. And that's me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, great. Thanks. Director Fall, you prepared?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So a couple items. So I'll go into a bit more detail on the service reviews. So March 17 and 18, I facilitated 3 service reviews. It was very productive, I would say. I'm very happy how they turned out, and I hope the participants were. So we're calling them each one a service review group, because there's not really a particular name. The Recreation Service made 3 recommendations related to the service establishment bylaw, working out an agreement, a new agreement with the city, and to request information. The social planning service made one recommendation for information to help consider pros and cons and options regarding whether the service should be kept or not. And the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department Service Review Group made 7 recommendations on a variety of topics, 2 related to basic information and 3 that would require more in-depth staff reports. And all service review groups agreed to meet again after progress on the recommendations and information is received. I'm very happy to report all of those recommendations were made by unanimous consent by the groups. They're very constructive discussions and not even that long. I think they were about an hour and a half each. So it was actually really, really good. And all participants, I filled out as facilitator, I wrote notes that had those recommendations, made sure everyone signed off on it more or less, because they're sort of like minutes without having that formal structure. And then those have been sent to the corporate officers. So they will work their way through our system, come to the board, some of them, most of them, and then eventually make their way back to the service review groups. And I don't expect the service review groups will probably meet until the autumn, I would guess, because it'll take time for some of that. I received an email the last night, or maybe it was this morning, from Dr. Ron Abrams from the Liskidi Last Resort Society. So maybe he was watching our meeting yesterday. He wanted to let me know, and I said I'd report to the group that the batteries, these lithium-ion batteries, are installed to code. Not everything on Liskidi's code, but the health. Some stuff on Liskidi's code, but anyways, it's the Last Resort Society makes things to code, and he wanted the board to know that they are put into code, so we can sleep well at night. One of the big items that was before the local trust committee, the Islands Trust Local Trust Committee, was the land use bylaw amendment application from Connected Coast to put in the landing. And because the Islands Trust, this goes much slower than the regional district. They only meet every 2 months. So they brought a bylaw amendment forward in October, but the staff, trying to make things more efficient, recommended that everywhere land-based zone, which is 95% of Liskidi, would allow utilities. And that kind of caused some people on Liskidi, because not everyone, I'd say almost everyone doesn't want electricity. We have our own. So that caused some consternation. I got sent back, staff came back with a very narrow application. I mean, that was to save having to do it twice for a while. They brought back and said it's only this very narrow carve out just to bring it up through the foreshore next to the ramp to a box that's buried. That had a public hearing, and there is some opposition, so that was quite vociferous. And then there was some counter opposition because people started to realize this was at risk, and more or less, I think they ended up with 200 letters. They extended the public hearing. The public hearing was I couldn't attend, and I was glad because I watched the community information meeting went for 3.5 hours. I thought I could go to this anyways. 3.5 hours for the community information meeting with all the discussion, people standing up and talking, and then they opened the public hearing. It was another hour, so I watched that, and then they kept it. Meaning the local trust committee kept it open for 2 more weeks, and which was good because then that gave time for the island to really kind of say, okay, if you want to speak, now's the time. And I think there was over 200 people spoke in favor, and about 30 wrote individual letters. And then there was a petition that had a mix of on-island and off-island residents, but another 30, but at least 40 against and 200 in favor. So the local trust committee passed it. That allows Connected Coast. Now there was a bit of a timing issue, and it was unfortunate because it would have been nice to have a bit more public process. That's part of the issue here, that it would have been nice to talk more, but the Connected Coast is between a rock and a hard place in the sense they don't get the go-ahead, they don't know, and then they had to apply for the rezoning, but then the federal government says you should, this is the very end. They needed the approval from the local trust committee to get this rezoning of this land use bylaw amendment by March. Because the federal government says money runs out. This is not just the deadline for this year, it's the deadline period. If you miss it, then maybe you don't get to connect to the backbone and so on, ripple effect. So that's the process that got passed. Now Connected Coast will go ahead and put the landing, and that'll be put in place. A lot of the concerns were about last mile, which was confusing the matter. So more information has to come forward to clarify that this was just an option. It's just an option. The Liskidi doesn't have to connect, but even if it doesn't happen for a while, at least it's there. So that's good. So we'll have last mile or Connected Coast to be able to finish their project, and there will be a box there. The only other item I want to report on is the Dr. Dana Lepovsky, this archaeology professor from Simon Fraser University, who we've given a grant and aid before, she's got her Huete archaeological project, XLAP. She coordinated with the Liskiti Arts Council and applied for funding to put together this mural. So she's been doing a lot of archaeology around False Bay. So when you come into where the ferry comes in, the dock is, about the sites and really learning more and more that how many people were actually living there pre-settlement. And it's a lot more than most people think. She had this vision of having a mural commissioned to make a painting of what it might look like. There are some artists who were interested. They got BC Arts Council gave some funding. They did this mural, and the mural is going to be really big. It's on the freight shed on the dock. It's going to be on the freight shed, the part facing the water and then wrapping around the corner. And it's going to be unveiled in May the 3rd. And so yesterday at the C2 at the Snickers meeting with the get together with Plattman executive, at least 2 Plattman were talking about maybe going down, Plattman members, and maybe more. I don't know if it'll be by boat, but if you're interested, find a way to hitch a ride and go down there and, seeing it from the water. So it's designed primarily, I mean, you can see it from people around, but really it'll be designed so that residents will see it and they'll know, but visitors will come in and they'll see the dock, they'll look up and they'll see this big mural, and then they can look at what's there now and they can get an idea of what it looks like. So it's artistic, but of course, based on, trying to be based on what was actually found in terms of house sites, numbers of, so I think it's pretty exciting. That'll be pretty fun. And if I'll try to at least get a photo of it for the board.
Please do.
That's it for now. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. And I mean, Connected Coast, you guys must have set like a percentage record for public engagement on that issue to have that many responses. Pretty impressive. Director Gisborne.
Well, thank you, Chair. As has been referenced, the February the 28th, the legislative reform with Dylan Lidstone, which was hosted through AVICC. Absolutely wonderful to attend virtually, and I'm sure those of you that were attending saw that I asked a number of questions that seemed to also be keen on other folks, because of course we had to vote them up. So really interested to see how that plays out, because of course, what was it Dawn said? Be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. On March the 4th, I attended the Virtual Regional Connectivity Knowledge Network through the UBCM, where they talk about connectivity issues around the province and, fiber cables and some of the challenges they're dealing with, everything from Connected Coast to some of the inland areas. And of course, how some of the telecom providers, they'll say, oh, well, this region is serviced, but then the people are saying, no, it isn't. On March the 5th, and I should have mentioned this yesterday because I attended the Four Tides Hospice Society's meeting about, finding a location, but I attended that as the chair of the hospital district because that's why they had invited me. So I should have mentioned that yesterday. On the 17th, we had the Sub-Regional Recreation Service Review and the Social Planning Service Review, and they went very well. And I'm actually very pleased with how that's going, and great consensus building around the table, and a big thanks to Director Fall, or I guess Andrew, because during the service review group kind of gatherings, we were using first name basis and we were building consensus, and it's a process I found very productive and helpful, and I look forward to the next steps. On the 18th, we had the service review for the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department, same thing, and of course we're going to be taking a look at those recommendations in the future when they come before, I believe, Committee of the Whole or whatever they come before us. On the 19th, I started getting phone calls from folks in the Myrtle Pond water system because of discoloration and, people wondering what's going on. A big thanks to Patrick Devereaux for putting the notice out on the notice boards that the regional district, as you might recall, we approved putting those notice boards up so the public could be informed. And once that notice went up about what the issue was, as with the sand filters and things like that, and apparently there was not any concern around health. The health is the representative from Vancouver Coastal Health said it's just a discoloration issue, and they're hoping that in about a week or two, all the discoloration should be flushed from the system because of different wells being online. So had a number of calls and folks going like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I'm not the operator. I got that one. And then on the 23rd, I hosted a town hall up at the Therapeutic Riding for folks of Area B, and had a number of folks show up, and it was wonderful because we didn't have the same old faces. We had some new folks show up. And interestingly enough, some of the folks from Nootka that had said, "Hey, we want to talk to you about the zoning bylaw," didn't show up. But I found out later that they were sick, and one of them had like a family health things. But there was completely new faces that showed up, and we talked about everything from budgets and financial plans and strategic plans, and the role of the director isn't, I'm not king. I don't get to just make it so when things happen. But an interesting thing that I'll share with the assembly, and I shared this yesterday with the planning committee, I asked the question, who here is satisfied with the current state of the Nootka Street zoning bylaw? And no one raised their hands. So I want to say a big thank you to everyone on the planning committee for yesterday, as we are moving forward with addressing at least some of those concerns. And yes, yesterday, March 25th, attended the social with the Tla'amin executive. And that was wonderful to touch base and meet them. As most of Tla'amin has most of their territory up in Area A area, but there's also a fairly large chunk that exists between the city of Powell River and Area B. So there was some discussion around, how can we work together in the future as just a very high level. Don't worry, no decisions were made, no handshakes or anything like that. And with that, that is essentially the end of my report. With one last thing, this is actually my last meeting with the board as a young adult. At the end of the week, I will. I will.
What are the implications?
I will see 40 at the end of the week, so I should hopefully be more subdued and more, mature and less of a troublemaker for our next board meeting. We can only hope. Well, we'll see.
I'm not sure where young adulthood is.
I know that's what I was
it's old young adult.
I've seen that apparently it's 40 is when you
there
start
we go.
going through that big change. So
There's a debate.
Yeah, there's a debate. Okay, Director Lennox.
Thank you. I'll start. Thanks. I'll start off with a thank you to Andrew as well for his work and the 3 service reviews. I mean, I think there's a consultancy in your future here if we let people know how you've handled that, and it's just the group has been able to come to some good action so far. So far so good. Been happy to be part of that. Although and the time change, I was 4 hours ahead, being on the East Coast with the spring ahead. So I was probably not looking so happy during the meeting. But thanks for that. Getting still feedback on the recent impacts from harvesting in the Oakover area along Crowther Road and up Malaspina Road has been very harshly impacted the road surface. And again, we're just advocating, and poor Reno getting a lot of communication on that. But I do understand the Mosaic and MOTT are very aware, and there's some mitigation, and we just need to continue helping people to be kind of productive in their communication. So that's ongoing. Working on AVICC is coming up soon, and I got a call from folks that are organizing some of the smaller workshops for EAs. So you might see my ugly mug trying to help on a couple of relevant topics that may be pertinent to all of us. Roads and small water systems, surprise. So for some reason, the other groups think that I might have something to add to that, so I'll help facilitate it if I can. Hopefully you'll attend. Recent receipt of the groundwater resources on Savory Island. I know we just saw that yesterday, but I'm digging through a very comprehensive report. It's very important information for lots of folks, including those watching, residents, and people who own property or thinking of owning property or visiting the island, because a lot of it is education. And when we know more about how our impacts on limited resources like Savory and our other areas in the region, it's for the better, and it'll be a big part of the OCP update process that we're underway with. Lots more work to come soon. And there's also, I just got an email, thank you staff, with just the OCP background report. The latest one is looks like it's now been issued, and we're also looking at the advisory committee meeting in mid-April. So we're just confirming the dates, so that'll also add to the work on the OCP. The new Oakover Federal Marine Facility, basically the dock down there, pretty cool. Go check it out. It's a new example of what I believe, I can't confirm, but is the new approach to federal marine facilities instead of these high pilings that you see, the old school pilings that we all drove out onto, and then a ramp. Basically you ramp down, we've seen some of them on the lower coast, onto a float system. So Oakover's received some attention, and now Lund is also getting a facelift as far as the federal part, where the floats there are getting new creosote wood, structure underneath them, significant work going on. So that's good for our communities, and, trying to encourage the feds to keep doing that. So I giving them a thumbs up on that type of infrastructure maintenance. Thankfully, it was in town and not working out of town to attend that meeting yesterday with a couple members from Tla'amin, and a very relevant, as you said, Area A is, and the nation's treaty settlement lands and their traditional lands are very much intertwined with all of us, and especially in my area. And having a younger counselor there who is working actually for the nation on other projects in the area, in Lund and Tla'amin, presents some opportunities for us to have coffee and just have that was the greatest outcome from that. We were able to jot down some notes about a whole bunch of issues that we should be talking about, and really to me there are a bunch of opportunities there, right? Like for maybe small wins, but then that just builds upon success. So it was great to talk to those folks. Communication with ASIC on Savory, the committee there, and others around roads especially. But on a positive note, MOTT recently sent a barge over with 2,000 tons approximately of gravel, which is significant. I'm sure lots of the locals would say it wasn't enough, but I think I'm hearing good report. That's a positive thing to occur after the recent communication that we've given them. And they're also communicating like we are with the ministry on maintaining those. So that's an example of some progress. And we'll hear how easy it is to maintain as the spring unfolds. Just driving in today, just good to see staff, contractors on our building committee at the Northside Community Recreation Center. There's spray paint on the field and in the parking lot, and trucks are there, and so it's starting to ramp up towards actual activity. So it's exciting for the community. So thanks again to our staff for continuing on with that. And then I agree with Director Southcott and others about the power of positivity and good governance. Because it's easy to dwell on the tough stuff, but we always try to acknowledge the good stuff and work toward that. So that's what I've been trying to remind myself.
Well, I was just going to mention that. I said, you're right. We need to recognize the good stuff that, especially the MOTT.
Whatever it is, yeah.
Because, I don't envy Reno his.
No. So I got to give them their props, right?
Exactly. We gotta do that, and not just for Reno, but for everybody. We got to recognize when good work is done. Director Isaacs.
Thank you, Chair. Not much to report being the alternate director, but also ditto. I observed the service review conversation. Particularly, I'm interested in the recreation service, so we'll be keeping my eye out for when those are, so I can just stay informed from this side of things. And then also with Councillor Elliott being away, participated in her stead at the C2 casual conversation last night with members of Tla'amin Nation Executive Council, and always great to be able to just connect on a personal level and hear, new councillor and how the job's going, and just, getting to know each other, so that when more dynamic or challenging conversations happen, there's a foundation of understanding and appreciation. So thank you.
Thank you for your words. Okay, we're moving on to item 10, consent agenda. Is there anything to be pulled for? So, Raise your hand, otherwise somebody can raise a hand to move it. Director Paul, moving it, seconded Director Gisborne. No discussion on this, all in favor? Motion passes unanimously, great. Move on down to resolutions 12.1. Number 1.
I'll move it.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Director Lennox. Any
Yes.
discussion? Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, this motion and the next motion are kind of related. This one is about increasing the annual contribution to the statutory reserve fund number 1 for fire halls. It's a $70,000 increase. I'm kind of speaking against it, even though I'm the mover, but I will end up voting in favor because if I try and change anything at the 11th hour and 59 minutes, I don't think that's entirely polite to Linda Green and our manager of financial services. But the reason I bring this up is back in 2019, we did an increase to the MVFD fire protection service, and the intent there was every year our prior year surplus would go into the reserves, and it would either go into apparatus or fire hall or the non-statutory, and this increase is $70,000, and I just want to point out to everyone that ever since 2019 we have been putting a fair amount of money into our various reserves based on the recommendations of our staff. The next item that comes up is to kind of give back the $45,000 of the prior year surplus. So it's like, okay, we'll increase the requisition by $70,000 for this one. And then the next one is we give $45,000 back. So it's kind of like, half a dozen of one way or 6 of the other. So when we start getting into the 2026 financial plan, that's going to be something I'm most likely going to be moving in the other direction of saying, hey, let's try and stabilize that annual requisition, and then the prior year surplus should be the amount that we want to see going into our reserves. But for now, I'll support this, but I'm not a huge fan of saying, hey, this is how much we're going to put into our reserves every year. And then doing the prior year surplus, handing it back, because it kind of gives that impression of like, hey, if we don't spend it this year, we won't get it next year. And I don't like sending those kind of signals. But that's all I'll say on it. But like I said, I'll vote in favor of it because I want to be nice to Linda.
I'll do. No other hands up, we'll call the vote. All in favor? Unanimously. Number 2.
I'll move.
Gisborne, Lennox, discussion. Hands, all in favor? Passes, thank you. Number 3, it's a 2-parter there. Somebody like to move that? Paul, seconded by Director Gisborne. Any discussion? None? In favor? Carries. Thank you very much. Number 4.
Moved.
Paul, Director Lennox. Discussion. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I'm gonna vote against this one just because, the flagpole right now is $5,000. It's gone down from $10,000, but I think the greater cost is going to be, the policies, the direction for staff to, get the flags, to put them up. See this as kind of a symbolic thing. I'm not saying, hey, let's never have a flagpole. I just think, with all the increases that we're having, this isn't really the year to be spending this and moving on this direction. Our staff are very busy, and I see this as an investment in future budget spending. But that's just my opinion. I spoke to this at the finance committee, and I saw how that vote went, so I probably know how this one's going to go.
Okay. Very much. Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Director Gisborne opposed. Item 5. Director Paul, seconded Director Lennox. Thank you. Any discussion? Director Gisborne.
Yeah, the motion for us is the board directs staff to allocate any 2024 surpluses that are not scheduled to be brought forward to support 2025 budgets, and that the most appropriate reserve fund for each respective service. So my understanding is this is very kind of different than what we've done with the fire department services, where, hey, if we have prior year surpluses, it goes into the reserves, which is kind of different than what we just did with our fire department budgets, where we said, hey, the prior year surplus we'll give back to the taxpayer. So I don't support this. But, you know, this is the 11th hour and 59 minutes, and I'll probably just vote in favor of it as well.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to comment. I think there is in the future maybe opportunity for discussion on surpluses. We've had discussion about that at prior finance committee meetings. I think when, you know, this one in my mind, you know, when you're dealing with services that have large surpluses, like the fire department ones, I think doing deliberative decisions and deciding how much goes one way or the other makes sense. When it's dealing with relatively small surpluses and general, you know, a lot of clean, you know, just as a general rule, I support this. I think it makes sense to say, well, we're taking all the smaller amounts and the normal, you know, the amounts from all the many services we have, putting them into the reserves. That seems totally appropriate. I think the discussion point is really what to do when surpluses are quite large. And then I think discussing deliberatively whether that's the right thing to do individually for those services. And we did that this year with the fire departments. I think it was appropriate. and I think that's something that we may want to think about a bit earlier in the process, how that should be done. And it's a matter of seeing, you know, if we get a heads up ahead of time, where we expect surpluses to be. But, for this budget and to finalize, I think it makes total sense to do this and sweep it into reserve, and we got that extra funding, and it'll be useful for resiliency.
Great. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Sorry.
12.6. Thank you. I'll just
12.6.
share.
12.6, yeah.
Thanks for jumping in.
So I'll move that the board direct staff to increase the 2025 Electoral Area E grant and aid budget by $9,457.15, and that the additional funding be incorporated in the 2025 to 2029 financial plan bylaw number 600/2025 for consideration at this meeting.
Seconded.
Okay, second by Director Gisborne. Discussion.
And I'll just mention briefly, we had this comes out of the hospital district board yesterday, where we were able to, it was only possible to fund that amount to help support the Last Resort Society for their battery replacement. That seems like a little bit on the low side to really help them get a step up towards completing that, you know, the funding requirement for that. So this is to allow consideration. And the reason to do it this way is it allows, you know, I'll be able to go back, explain to the Last Resort Society the process. They'll have to apply, and then it'll also be an opportunity for the public to weigh in if they, you know, have a comment on it. And then the grant and aid will be, if the Last Resort Society chooses to apply for grant and aid, then that'll go through the consideration process when we consider those, usually in May or something like that.
Okay, great. Any other comments? None? All in favor? Motion carries. Now we're up to point one. Director Fall moves it, seconded by Director Southcott. Thank you. Any discussion? Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. This is actually a question that I was asked the other day by a Texada resident who wanted to know what percentage of a tax increase we could expect. And so I started looking through in minute detail and discovered that that is not an easy question. On page 20 of the report, which refers to electoral area D, but I imagine the same principle would be for any area. At the very bottom, it says the requisition change from 24 to 25 is that much, and that is 11.17% increase. So that requisition has gone up. But then when I looked at the tax rate between last year and what's proposed for this year, that's only about a 3% increase. To make it even more challenging to answer, when I looked at page 13 of our report, which is the annual requisition comparison for electoral area G, the 11.17% is still there, reflecting requisition increase. But when it says the estimated tax, the estimated tax for last year and this year is 10%. So I don't know which number is the right answer.
Well, I imagine Ms. Green can probably sort it out.
I really hope so,
Yeah,
because
Ms. Green, that's
I
right, go ahead.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it is a complicated question. So the one that you're looking at on page 13, that shows that the requisition, the average change per average household on Texada Island should expect about a 10% tax increase. So that's why you see the 10% there, and that's because it's based on an average household. And the reason it doesn't equate exactly with the requisition change is because then we take the denominator changes, because the assessed values change each year. If the assessed values stay constant and the average home value stayed constant, then it would be an apples to apples comparison. But in this case, because all of those variables change, it's approximately 10% is what they can be expecting for an increase, or about $80.60 per year for an average home.
And then, thank you, that makes sense. But when I look at page 20, which is the annual requisition comparison, Electoral Area D, when I look at the requisition change, okay, 11.17, but then the tax rate for last year versus the tax rate for this year is about a 3% increase. So I'm not sure. I'm looking at 204.89 for the tax rate in 24 versus 211.01 for the proposed tax rate for 25.
Go ahead, Ms. Green.
Thank you, Chair, through the chair. So that the reason that changes is that is the change per $100,000. So we're missing another variable there. In this case, the variables for the assessment base are still there, but the variable for the average home value is not there. So so per $100,000, people can look at approximately $6.12. That's a dollar value, not a percentage point. So on average, the about 11%, an 11% increase per $100,000. So one is a per 100,000 and one is a per average home value.
Thank you. But why wouldn't, for example, looking still at page 20, the requisition increase, which equals 11.17%, why would that not be the same as the tax rate increase, regardless of how expensive or not a piece of property is, or what its assessment is? Why wouldn't the tax rate not match the requisition?
Go ahead, Ms. Green.
Thank you, Chair. It's because the denominator changes. You know, the amount that you're dividing it over changes. Like I said, if everything else remained the same, if all of the assessed values remained the same, then you would see an 11% increase. But because the assessed values changed, you know, they changed from residential to industrial. They might have changed in value and market values. There's so many changes going on with the denominator, like the number that we're dividing it over, that's why it doesn't translate exactly to the 11%.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Director Gisborne.
Yes. My question is in relation to page 4, which has the tax rate per 100,000 and cost per average home for 2024 and 2025. Now, I think this is in a bit relation to what Director McCormick's talking about, and this is something that's come up in Area B, where folks saw the news article, I guess, where they said, hey, a 25% requisition increase, are my taxes going up 25%? My first response was no. That's not how that works. And as I understand, the total requisition now with this financial plan for Area B is a 15% total requisition. So my first question is, when I look at the chart on page 4 with the tax rate per 100,000, and these are, I believe estimates because they might get adjusted based on the total assessed value of Area B, as 197.91 in 2024, and then 2025 is going to be 213.89. And my first question is, are those numbers as accurate currently? Is that the correct number? That'll lead to my next question.
Go ahead, Ms. Green.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that is the correct number. So what will happen is this is based on the BC Assessment 2025 completed roll values, and they will be based on the revised roll values. But there's, generally the change is not significant between the completed and the revised roll values. So they should be close to what people would see for an average increase. So in Area B, they can expect to see about $184 per average home of an increase.
Okay, and that's where my next question comes in, because I had folks that showed up to the town hall. I get folks that call me wondering about tax increase, and my first question is always, well, how much did your assessment change? And when I look at this mill rate, and mill rate as in we don't set that, but rate per thousand. I did the kind of calculation, and it works out to about $15.98 increase per 100,000, and that's roughly an 8% increase. So I tell folks, if nothing changed on your assessment, like if your assessed value did not change at all, then you're looking at roughly an 8% tax increase for your property. And I'm just wondering, did I get that math right?
Ms. Green?
So the tax rates per 100,000 are, so it depends if you're looking at an average home or. Sorry.
No, just the tax rate.
Okay.
So like because I'm totally aware that the average assessed value changes, and it's kind of like if someone's assessment does not change at all, then that would be roughly an 8% increase. Because that would be essentially like, the rate per 100,000, I believe, is going up by about 8%. But of course, everyone's property taxes, property assessment changed by, some went up by 3%, some went up by 15 or 20. And when I did that very simple calculation of like, what is it per 100,000, and assuming that, so roughly 8% if nothing else changed on their assessment.
That through the chair, yes. So if nothing else changed on their assessment, it would be for Area B approximately 8% increase per 100,000.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad I did not get the numbers wrong and get a bunch of people even more confused. And thank you very much for that. That's the end of my question. And thank you, Linda Greenan, for all the work you've done to get us to this point in the financial plan.
Director Paul.
Thank you, Chair. First, just a comment, and that's that I really want to thank our financial staff, and in particular, our manager of financial services, for all the work done and entertaining all the changes that we've made along the way. Huge amount of work, and it's a huge amount of numbers put forward, 150-page updates. We've had 4 updates and even another update, number 5. So I think this is really great. And the other comment is that it's, the information provided is really extensive, and it's a lot of moving pieces to do this. There's assessed values changes, needs change, numbers of houses change, so people's properties go up differentially too, and there's all these complexities, and different areas of our region look at this differently. So from a service point of view, we look at dollars. So we say this is how much that service needs, so many dollars, and the dollars it needs, because zero-based budgeting goes from what it was from last year. So an increase in the service is X% plus or minus from last year. Then there's the needs of meeting our requirements for financial plan, which is what the province says, which is tax rates, because the tax notices go into tax rates and what we have for assessment. So we have to convert that to tax rates, which are really confusing for most individuals, because the average person, the average homeowners, what they see is their tax notice, and they want to understand what the change was, and they're getting the average you know, and they don't have the average, but they want to get the expectation. So if their house changed in value the same as everyone else's and the average was X%, they can expect theirs to go up by X%. But if they went up more or not as much or went down, everything's off the table. So they, you know, they have to get that. And you can't explain that. They'll find, you know, the individual notices, the effects will show up when they get their tax notice and they'll start comparing and so on. So I really want to thank our staff for that. And I think it's really, really good. And of course, more information. I like more information, but more information can also risk being more confusing because then you get more numbers and then you got more things to figure out. But just to help maybe Director McCormick with a bit of information, there's the February Finance Committee had a report on assessed value changes. So that was really useful to understand the question because, you know, the Texada Island, the assessed values went up by approximately 7% or so. So if the mill rate went up by, or the tax rate went up by about 6%, when you multiply that together, you get the total dollar increase on average for the total requisition, which then gets translated back based on individual assessed value. So that's kind of helps to put it in context why the tax rate changes differently than the amount of dollars. So it's a lot of pieces, and I really think this is great. And I'm really happy to see that we've got it to this point, and hopefully we can put the puck in the net.
There you go. Yeah, Ms. Greenan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your comments. I appreciate that. I just wanted to mention too, on our website, now that we have the tax rates nailed down, like once they're nailed down after this meeting, on the QRD's website, we do have a tax assessment calculator. And so anyone can go on there and then just put in what their assessed value is this year and what it was last year, and they can see, you know, what they can expect for their taxes. We do have to, in that calculator, at this point, we do have to estimate the school tax, you know, the rural tax, police tax, etc. But the rates for the regional district and the regional hospital district will be accurate.
Thanks for that information. Appreciate it. Seeing no other hands, I think we'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to bylaws. 14.1, Run Community Center.
Maybe I should move that.
Maybe you should
The board give first.
Good idea.
You give
by Director Paul. Well, I guess you got to read it first.
I was going to read it,
Please do.
Chair, that the board give first and second reading of the Lund Community Center temporary borrowing bylaw number 601/2025.
And Director Paul has already seconded it. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Carries.
I move that the board give third reading of the Lund Community Center temporary borrowing bylaw number 601/2025.
Paul seconds. Discussion? None. All in favor? Carries.
And I move that the board adopt the Lund Community Center temporary borrowing bylaw number 601/2025.
Director Paul, discussion?
Just quickly, appreciate staff following the rules here and getting the fund ready to begin the work that I just talked about is ready to go. So exciting times. Thank you.
Awesome. Other hands, all in favor? Carries unanimously. Thanks very much. Yep.
Just for this next item of business, I just want to be clear that it's the one we're adopting the printed version, and that will be added to the agenda after this meeting with that change.
Sorry.
Perfect.
Good call.
We'd like to read that one.
I'll move that the board give first and second reading of the 2025 to 2029 financial plan bylaw number 600/2025.
Seconded by Director Lennox. Discussion? None. All in favor? Carries unanimously.
I'll move that the board give third reading of the 2025 to 2029 financial plan bylaw number 600/2025.
Director Lennox, discussion? None. All in favor? Carries unanimously.
I'll move that the board adopt the 2025 to 2029 financial plan bylaw number 600/2025.
Director Lennox, discussion? There is one.
I just want to say, because, you know, I've heard my residents, you know, there's some concerns around the tax increases. I do plan to vote in favor of this bylaw. That doesn't mean I agree with everything that's in it and everything that we've decided to spend money on it. But the reason why I will vote in favor is because I support the work that this board has done and the finance committee has done. And that part of my job is represent Area B and some of their concerns, but also part of my job is to uphold the will and the wishes of the board as a whole. So while I do support the bylaw, that doesn't mean I support everything in it. But I think we'll continue to work on what's happening with our 2026 budget, and let's make sure that we get on it before it becomes March 2026. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any other comments? None, all in favor? Carries unanimously. Okay, now new business, this one is struck, we have.
That was the mission that I drafted before and related to, well, let him speak.
Yes, let me just make sure I get up. Wait, what happened to my? Where did it go? Sorry, my internet's being weird. Because I sent.
I do, yes.
Oh, here it is. Okay, here we go. Putting forward a notice of motion that the board express its interest to meet with the Powell River City Council to discuss financial contributions to the Powell River Recreation Complex.
Okay. Very much. Moving on to item 16, question period. Is here Mr. Glinski?
I'm here, Chair. Thank you very much. An efficient meeting. I don't have any questions. Thanks for the opportunity.
Very welcome. So we have an in-camera session. Would somebody like to read that? Go ahead.
I'll move that the board move in camera and the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91C, labor relations or other employee relations, any negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of service that at the preliminary stages and that in the view of the board could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in public, and on the consideration of whether a board meeting should be closed under a provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Seconded by Director Paul. Any discussion? None, all in favor? Carries, we're going in.
I should have also done a notice of motion that I was gonna. The problem is they carry it, they aren't with the people for things stuff.
Yeah, you got it.
I don't know what he needed.
Yeah.
I've been investing in farm infrastructure. I got no much.
Yeah, this addition's got me holy.
I'm like,
Recording in progress.
Where's your interpretive?
Okay, thanks. Welcome back to the board meeting. We've reached the end of our agenda, so we are adjourned. Thank you for joining us.
Everybody.